Okay, everyone, welcome back to The Medical Disruptor, the New Method Live. However you're reaching here, nope, let me do this again. This week's episode, you are in for it today. Why? Because the title of today's episode is The World is Full of Toxins, which is scary, but your life doesn't have to be, which is a little bit better. Because we all know that there are toxins everywhere, and sometimes it feels so overwhelming. Like, where do we even start? Okay, did you even know that like our garbage bags are toxic because they have scents in it? Yeah, we're going to talk about that. So today's guest is going to make it a little bit less overwhelming for us. Her name is Sophia Ruan Gushee, and she's going to break it down. She is a non-toxic lifestyle expert, and she also wrote a book called A to Z of Detoxing. She also wrote The Ultimate Guide to Reducing Our Toxic Exposures and several detox workbooks. She has like a really cool 40-day detox protocol that you could do. And she is a graduate of Brown University and Columbia Business School. So today's episode, we kind of went off tangent. We went everywhere. And I think you're really, really going to love this guest. And it's slightly terrifying, but then you'll also breathe a sigh of relief when she tells you what to do next. So without further ado, let's welcome Sophia. Sophia, I am so excited to have you on my show.
I'm so delighted to be on your show.
Thank you. So, okay, the description, it's scary. The email that we send out is scary. The title of the show is going to be a little scary. So, before we jump into the scary part, I kind of want to know, how did you get into the scary world?
Not willingly.
That is true for all of us. Spill your story.
Not willingly. For me, it began at the age of 34. I was living in New York City. I had worked really hard to line up my dream job, my dream career, and I finally had it. And I met my husband when I was about 29 years old. Having been healthy my whole life, I just assumed that once we decided to try and have a baby, it would just happen. Sure. Why wouldn't it? Everything else in my life worked out pretty smoothly, especially health-wise. And after a year of trying and not conceiving and going down the route of trying to understand why, that just began the process of really appreciating how hard, really the miracle of life, how hard it is to actually conceive and deliver a healthy baby. And then even after the baby's born, there's so much to worry about. But I think because it wasn't easy, I dived more into my inner universe, my inner ecosystem. But it wasn't until I had my first child at the age of 34, and she looked so fragile to me. I felt so insecure about keeping her alive. Never mind even being a good mom, but like I felt so scared about, how do I not break her neck? How often do I feed her? And I was just so scared. And so my way of dealing with that was curating a reading list that I would reference every night. And I would come up with a plan for her next day, like a feeding schedule and other things in terms of child development. But in terms of that nightly ritual, that's how I started to accidentally learn about toxic chemicals, heavy metals, and later radiation from what I buy, own, and do. And it was really just through accidental exposures that I continued to learn about how pervasive it is, especially just within a home, and also how uniquely vulnerable certain populations are, but especially the youngest of us.
Oh my God, that's so true. First of all, I just want to unpack a few things. I know everyone's like dying to hear about the toxic stuff part. We'll get there, I promise. But I just want to recognize a little bit about the journey, because so many people experience what you have. First of all, getting pregnant. It's just not easy for some people, and we do take that for granted. I've definitely helped a lot of women on their fertility journey, and it's a big deal. And then also, I have 3 kids of my own. They're all big giants now, but that fear, that new mom fear, no one really talks about it. It's supposed to be like this hallmark moment. Everything's amazing. You're supposed to have this great, glow about you. And no one talks about the terror. I mean, I remember the first time, my daughter is 27 years old. I remember the first time I bathed her, I thought she was going to drown. Like, how do you even do it? So that fear is so real. And thank you for putting that out there, because I think a lot of people are going to be like, yes, me too. And it's not something we talk about. So thank you for putting it out there. So let me just make sure I understand. It wasn't through a personal journey of unwellness. It was just like you had the time to read, and so you went down the rabbit hole, and then you discovered some issues?
Yeah, so the first time I realized there were toxic exposures in a baby product was when my daughter was maybe a week old. And I was going through a book written by Dr. Alan Green, a pediatrician, and I read that there is bisphenol A or BPA in some baby bottles, and BPA may cause cancer. I later read within a page or two that nitrosamines is also a cancer-causing compound in some baby bottle nipples. And my reaction was, what? This can't be possible. Not in America, not products sold on American store shelves. And parts of me thought this can't be true, because if it were true, one of my trusted pediatricians or other doctors would have mentioned this, and I couldn't ignore it at the same time. So I, of course, went to research it online to answer the question of, are there credible sources that back this up? And by 2 a.m., I decided it seems like there's conflicting expert opinion on BPA, but I want to make a safer choice. What's a safer alternative? So then I was up till 4 a.m. on Amazon and blogs to figure out, what do I do instead? And when I finally realized glass baby bottles is an option, I need to research, well, is that even safe? Nowadays, BPA is more well known than it was in 2007, and glass baby bottles are also more mainstream than it was in 2007. But in 2007, nobody around me had heard of BPA.
Oh,
no one around me. I mean, in New York City, nobody was using glass baby bottles. And so part of me didn't know if I was crazy, and I was just trying to figure out what's a rational level of concern. That has always been my question.
That's a really, really good question. And before we even unpack that, I do want to say that even before the baby bottle part, we know that babies, their umbilical cords, right? What is it, like 200 chemicals that babies are already born with? They already got it prenatally before you even busted out that baby bottle, But I love that question that you asked, which is, am I crazy? Of course you are. This is the crazy show, okay? It's called Medical Disruptor. Everyone's crazy. All my clients are crazy. Your clients are crazy. We're crazy until we're not, until we become mainstream. That's fine. But how far down the rabbit hole is a question I get asked all the time with my clients, and I'm sure we're going to delve into that, because it's like, it feels never ending. It feels never ending. And sometimes I have to tell them, okay, well, let's choose which rabbit hole we want to go down, because it kind of is never ending. Before we do that, can you just tell me, like, this whole idea of, I guess, how did you get to this idea of non-toxic living? How did that, or what does that mean, non-toxic living? And then does it apply to everyone?
So non-toxic living is impossible. There's just
you heard it here, folks. It's impossible. Go to sleep. You can shut off the episode. It's done. Okay, fair. I love that. Go.
Just like it is impossible to have a perfect sleep routine, a perfect exercise routine, to always eat perfectly.
Preach.
It's impossible, and you wouldn't even enjoy your life if you're trying to make it perfect.
Yes.
And the point of life is to enjoy your life. So a balanced approach and an informed approach is what I propose. My podcast is called Practical Non-Toxic Living, because I've just been trying to figure out, I'm lucky my children are healthy. We don't have serious health issues. If there were a health issue, I would probably be speaking from a different perspective. But with a healthy household, I just want to know, how do I optimize the healthy living efforts I'm already making? For example, I've dived down so many rabbit holes, but let's just take, earlier in my family's life, when I read that there's arsenic, the cancer-causing arsenic in juice boxes, it's like, what? Because if you have really little kids in nursery school or kindergarten, juice boxes are everywhere.
Everywhere.
They're everywhere. They're in school. They're in birthday parties.
Symbol.
Yeah. And I just wanted to understand this more and spent, I don't know how many years researching because it's an ongoing investigation. It's not like there's a conclusion. By now we know that there's arsenic in too many juices that are made with juice concentrate. And it's because now products are a result of an international effort. The apples were maybe grown in some other foreign country. They probably spray lots of pesticides, and then the apples are sent somewhere else to be manufactured into juice, and that process can contaminate the juice concentrate. So it's really impossible to really know which prepackaged juices are really clean of pesticides and other toxic chemicals. And that's just one example of how it's really hard to know when your products are truly non-toxic, but it's just good to be mindful. And the more you can make your own juice, the more you can take the time. If juice is a big part of your family's life, take the time to dive deep into that rabbit hole so that your normal becomes detoxed. Because when you identify a brand that you trust, then as you and your family drink juice every week or multiple times a day, that really decreases your exposure over your lifetime. So I help people identify high impact areas to focus on because you can't do everything.
Yeah, that's so true. And I talk to my clients, we talked about a lot about nutrition and habits and sleep. It's really about finding a balance that works for you, because otherwise you will go crazy, stay up 4 a.m. researching this stuff. But also, to your point, you have a healthy family, thank God. So, you're also going to chase it to the extent it's also harming you, right? Like, everyone's exposed to mold, but not everyone has to detox from mold, or everyone, right? So, depending on what your symptoms are and how much free time you have. And the other thing is that I think you said is, and how, if juice is every day, you're going to want to do that. But if you drink juice once in a blue moon,
don't worry.
Resources it. Don't worry about it. This is going to be a little off script, and I don't even know if you have the answer, but is there malice here?
What do you mean by that?
Is there malice, like all these toxins that are in our food? Is there a malicious intent, not necessarily a malicious intent to harm, but maybe a malicious intent not to look into it too much? Why is it happening?
Well, of course, that's such a it's complex to answer, and it depends.
Fair.
In a nutshell, it depends. Many times, toxic exposures exist unintentionally. Let's take rice, for example. Arsenic has also been found in rice. And as a consumer, you can get to know which brands or which regions from which rice was grown tend to have lower levels of pesticides or heavy metals in the rice. And so, when arsenic is present even in the products sold by brands you trust, it's present because it was just in the soil. It was in the air. It somehow got in through the manufacturing process. Like if people in the manufacturing facility were wearing rubber gloves or vinyl gloves, they're like vinyl tubes, the vinyl can release chemicals into the rice. The food packaging material can also contaminate the rice. That's an example of if there's a rice producer and seller that has all the best intentions, the product may be contaminated from unintentional sources. So that's one example. On the extreme opposite, sometimes manufacturers do no harm. Like, let's just take big tobacco. We now know because of all the class action lawsuits and the internal memos that were reviewed by judges because of the lawsuits, we know what they knew. And they knew for decades that cigarette smoking, secondhand smoking was seriously harming people, yet they had strategies to confuse the public, regulators to delay regulation, and maximize sales in the meantime. And these strategies, I write about them in my book, A to Z of Detoxing. It was a very scary chapter to write about. I was very, very scared to write it. I felt like it was very important for consumers to know about. It's called Manipulative Business Strategies, and I identified 6 main ways big tobacco delayed regulation And it's important for consumers to know because you'll then recognize it going on today. And it was so effective that it was used by other industries, lead, chemical flame retardants, telecom, petroleum. So once you recognize this historical pattern, you then see it today, and it just helps make so much more sense of the conflicting opinions that you'll read about and hear about.
Oh, I love that. And of course, I'm going to link the book on our captions. What about Diet Coke? Aspartame. I've been trying to get as much studies as possible, and it's annoying that sometimes that is confusing because intuitively it feels that aspartame is a problem.
I'm not as informed about Diet Coke or aspartame because it's not in my life. We don't
Not in your life.
So
I love that answer. So it's not, you haven't spent time on it because it's not in your life. I love that. Okay. It's such a good answer, and it just proves what we said earlier, which is focus on the things that you need, right? If you don't drink Diet Coke, then who cares? I only brought it up because everyone talks about Diet Coke, and it seems that some of my clients who love Diet Coke, it seems to be really hard habit to break. So it's something that recurs all the time.
When I work with people, I have this thing called the love test that I ask people to do. I think it's really important that people feel like we're going to protect their joy and convenience, so they don't feel like the things they love, like Diet Coke, will be taken away. Because that will just shut them off to change.
Yeah.
And so, if we can just improve many other things in your diet or elsewhere, then you are doing so much. But
so
over
true.
time, you may feel better from the other changes, and you may feel ready to cut down. And so as you learn more about toxicity or some negative health effect from something, including like Diet Coke, it's so powerful to just be informed and then ask yourself, given what I know about the health risks, do I love it or do I need it in this moment? And increasingly over time, you'll say, I'll try an alternative. But when you really want it, just enjoy it.
I agree. You have to go on stages. You have to meet people where they are. If you're black and white, you're going to fail as a guide or as a healer, as a leader. You have to meet people where they are, and sometimes it's about titrating and coming slowly off of it. Like, people are always scared when we do, because we always do like a bit of a reset. And when we first start working together, people are always like, "Are you gonna mess with my coffee?" And I'm like, "No, I'm not touching your coffee. Don't worry. That you have your coffee the way you want to." But speaking of coffee, I think you have some tips on like detoxing coffee, tea, and wine. Can you first tell me why we need to detox them?
Sure, I'll talk about coffee and tea.
Okay.
So the ingredients themselves, you ideally would be mindful of. So for example, pesticides may have been sprayed on the plants that produce the tea leaves, or the pesticides can be used on the coffee beans. For coffee, maybe teas, it depends on the manufacturer. Additional chemicals may be used to add color, to improve taste, smell, flavor. And then the food packaging can also contaminate the coffee and tea. For example, microplastics have been found in tea, and like if you steep a tea bag, hundreds of microplastics have been found in the tea that you'll be drinking. Similarly, coffee and even a paper cup. Paper cups, think about it. Normal paper would disintegrate with liquid.
Sure.
So there are chemicals lined,
Coating it
to keep the paper cup a paper cup.
Sure.
That won't disintegrate. And often there's a plastic coating or other chemicals that will contaminate the coffee. And so thousands of microplastics have been found in some studies after, I think it was like 15 minutes of holding hot coffee. And so to understand the different different potential sources of toxicity in tea or coffee can help you make an informed choice. So if you love, for example, my husband loves getting coffee from a vendor outside our home. Just homemade isn't the same. He likes the ritual of walking out.
Yeah.
And then I'm too lazy to make coffee for just me. So we both have coffee from probably a toxic coffee cup. This was my wish. I bought these really cool coffee mugs that had stainless steel inside. And it was a nice blue color, which I thought would incentivize him to actually use it. I would actually use it if I were the one going to get the coffee. And sometimes he did try once. He brought these 2 coffee mugs to the coffee store, asked them to just use the mugs, reusable mugs. And because we have a dog, he really did not like his experience of holding these 2 coffee mugs and our unwieldy, misbehaved, really bad dog. And and he never did it again. But if if you listener could handle that, that's a way. If you have coffee every morning or multiple times a week, that's an opportunity to detox your exposures to microplastics by using a reusable coffee mug made out of glass or stainless steel. I just now try and not have it as often, so that's another way to detox your exposure. And I also stock my home with healthier coffee beans so that when I am motivated to make a pot of coffee, I have that option. But I like being informed and making a conscious choice. And with tea, I now avoid buying tea that comes in plastic tea bags. There's a brand I like. I think it's PIQUE. My niece who works with me says that it's supposed to be the way it's processed. The nutrients from tea are also more bioavailable. So
Right?
yeah. So,
So I'm assuming you really don't like the K-cups or the pods. That's a no. That's not microplastic. That's macroplastic.
well, in addition, yeah, I haven't looked into it because though they are not in my life either, but I would wonder does it come with coffee ingredients in the pod?
Coffee ingredients in the pod. Then you
I would imagine they're chemicals for color and taste and preservatives.
without question, they smell very different.
And then also just, I try and reduce my use of plastic just for my grandchildren.
So good. So good. So, so then that brings us to the other favorite beverage, wine.
Oh, yes. So I recorded a podcast with Todd White, who's founder of Dry Farm Wines, and learned so much about wine for the first time. I didn't know that the FDA has approved 76 additives that winemakers can add to wine. Many winemakers, especially in the United States, also add additional alcohol and sugar to wine sold in America. And it's a version of fast food. Fast food, packaged foods tend to have more sugar, more salt to make it taste better. And then you need preservatives to make it last longer. Same idea with a lot of wine. And so, and then there's mold that's often in wine. So Dry Farm Wines is one seller of biodynamic natural wines. They visit all the vineyards that they sell and they laboratory test the wines that they sell for chemicals, mold, added alcohol, and added sugar. And many people, if not everyone I've talked to, says that you could drink a bottle of this wine and wake up with no hangover.
Really?
That's not a recommendation, but
what's the name of this company?
Dry Farm Wines. I'm actually an affiliate partner too.
Are you?
Yeah, I'll send you a link because through this link you could try a bottle for a penny.
No, let's put it out. I mean, I'm not an affiliate, but maybe some of our clients would like that. Let them enjoy it. And if you get something out of it, why not? It's a win-win.
Well, what my husband and I do, because it's not like every bottle's necessarily great, but if he and I are just gonna unwind at the end of the day over a glass of wine, we don't need it to be fancy. And
yeah, and you definitely don't need the extra stuff to it. I never considered wine like fast food when it adds all this other stuff. Because wine, I'm not a wine drinker, so wine always feels sophisticated to me, and I never considered that there's fast food wine and then there's wine.
Yeah, that was my takeaway. Most wine, especially wine made in America, is fast food wine, which makes sense if you understand that American consumers are used to this fast food.
We're used to things that are sweeter and saltier, and our bliss points have really been massaged to a whole different level. It's so true. What is it about, you might not know this, I'm sorry, I'm asking you some questions out of left field because
I love that.
I was just so intrigued, but this FDA approved. Like, why does I don't know what to ask you. Why, or is it really different in this country versus other countries? This FDA approved. Why do they approve all these things for wine and other things? Are we less? I don't really know how to form this question for you. Are we really less strict than other countries? Do you know? Can you give us some insight on this FDA approval?
I'm definitely not an expert on the FDA. As I've come across their decisions and behaviors, as I've studied specific chemicals and other things, I just know they're far from perfect, which is no surprise. I don't know much about the FDA. I don't know how understaffed or under budget they are. I don't know if a portion of them become influenced by the opportunity to then go work in the private sector later.
That's right.
There are reports of a revolving door where people who've worked in government, like the FDA, then go work for a private company like Monsanto, and then they end up at the FDA, then they go back. It's this revolving door. There's definitely that pattern documented in certain industries. So I think it's highly complex. I think Americans should not have a false sense of security if something is FDA approved. I did before I
Of course,
researched
we
it.
all did.
Yeah, and I don't, but my guess is that, now I know no country is perfect. Europe is often applauded for regulating so many more chemicals as they should. They have a precautionary approach. Which means their policies reflect the position of we rather be safe than sorry. And the United States has a reactionary approach to regulating chemicals, heavy metals, and also the electromagnetic fields. I mean, it's not only after there's very strong proof, but it can take decades after there's very strong proof of harm. For example, there's this really great nonprofit called the Environmental Health Trust, which was founded by Dr. Deborah Davis, who's a leading scientist on how the electromagnetic fields from our wireless technologies affects our biology and reproduction. And she, among others, filed a lawsuit against the FCC for not updating their regulations of wireless emissions since 1996.
Insane.
So the standards now were established in 1996, and as a reminder,
when who had cell phones back then?
Exactly. As a reminder, the iPhone was introduced to the world in 2007.
That's
and
insane.
Think about all the other technologies that have been created to be compatible with the iPhone.
Sure.
Speakers, computers, earphones,
Bluetooth, everything.
The current standards do not reflect the science that has emerged since then. And so there are some really great nonprofits led by scientists that vet the science, aggregate it, and this nonprofit won. The court ruled in the favor of scientists, but
said,
FCC, you have to respond to these list of things, and there's no deadline.
Oh, very nice. We'll get to it one day. Not. Wow.
I can't explain that behavior, but there are other examples of authorities making important choices that don't make sense.
Okay. I try very hard in what I do not to go down the conspiratorial rabbit holes. But the more I learn, the more I speak to people like you, the more difficult that becomes. So I applaud you for also, with everything you know, really trying to use neutral language, and I'm not sure, and I don't know why, and perhaps it's this, right? So I applaud you for that, because it's very easy to not do that. But the evidence is mounting that there is a lot of malice and greed involved at the expense of all of us. So we're going to leave it at that so that no one shows up at our door and kills us. No governmental agencies come knocking on our door, but we've put enough question marks, and everyone's at this episode is going to lie. I know it. Okay, so let's regroup. Now that we are all sufficiently terrified and we know there's not a lot of people. You know what, let me just say this before I even go on to ask you some tips. I just want to take a moment to applaud you I used to spend my time doing podcasts by myself, and now I have guests coming on. And what I'm discovering is a community of like-minded thought leaders who are dedicating their lives to making the statements and being crazy. Because you could have just researched this for your baby and kept it for your family, but you kept going. Then you wrote a book about it, now you're doing podcasts, and these things take time. And they also, you have to put yourself out there, be called crazy. You're the weird one. You're the kid that brings raisins to the candy, to the party. Like, you have to be weird. And when I first ventured out, I was a quack. And I have to take a moment to applaud you, because if people don't take that risk and be willing to put themselves out there, then the people who are searching don't have this. So I really want to take a moment to acknowledge that for you. So thank you for doing that. That being said, give us, our listeners who are currently panicking, give us some low lift tips that we can use like tomorrow so we could assuage like our terror.
Well, I really hope no one's panicking. I think I don't spend much time getting mad at things I can't control, and I just want to focus on what can I do? What can I control? What are the easy things I can control? And thankfully, there are great nonprofits and others who are trying to change laws and regulations. So I just want to know, how can I protect my family?
Yes.
And spreading and getting more people to care. So it helped me to share some information so people have a framework from which to think about this topic. Since World War II, there have been over 86,000 chemicals introduced into American commerce. Less than 1% of them have been tested for safety for human health and development, and very few are regulated. So it's very important that consumers become aware of what they're buying for their homes and their bodies. Also, recognize some behavioral things that can really detox your exposures. For example, indoor air tends to be at least 2 to 5 times more polluted than outdoor air, even in the most industrialized cities. And when I learned that, I thought, why? What is making the indoor air so toxic? And it's from what we buy, own, and do. So we can't change. I don't talk to people about you should change your drywalls and flooring materials and wallpaper. I don't talk about things that are hard to control, but everything else you buy for your home, like your cleaning products, your personal care products, your interior furnishings, like many other things, also contribute to poor indoor air quality, and those you can detox as is comfortable for you. So recognizing that indoor air tends to be much more polluted than outdoor air, it then makes intuitive sense that cracking open your windows when outdoor air quality is better than indoor air quality
That's insane.
A really simple way to detox your indoor air quality. I learned the hard way, you still have to be mindful of when you crack open your windows. If it's allergy season, mosquitoes.
You have asthmatics in the house.
Yes.
Yeah.
Want to be mindful. Also, if you live near agricultural land or you have a neighbor that's spraying pesticides, just be aware of that, because otherwise more of that can be blown into your home. But usually at night, there isn't as much activity outside, and that is often the best time to air out your home to provide escape routes for the toxic fumes.
It's a great tip. That's a great tip, because every single thing that comes to our home packaged and it has nowhere to go.
Yeah.
It has nowhere to go. That is a great tip. I, on the other hand, do tell people to remove their drywall and their wallpaper, because I do with a lot of people who have mold, and so then we have no choice.
Yeah.
So between you and I, they're going to have to live in a tent. Anyway, but back to your next tip. Sorry.
Another simple high-impact tip is to recognize that whenever there's combustion activity inside, the combustion activity is more likely to pollute the air. For example, if you're cooking on a stovetop, you're burning stuff, and that is more likely to release toxic particles or fumes into the air. So turn on the ventilation. So many people don't ventilate when they're cooking.
True.
Another example of combustion is if you're using a fireplace. If you're burning things in the fireplace, just be aware that that can pollute indoor air quality, so crack open the windows during that time. And think twice if you have a baby in the home or young kids, or anyone in the home whose respiratory system is compromised, just know that the burning wood in the fireplace can exacerbate their lungs and respiratory health. And also burning candles. That also is a common source of toxicity.
Especially the ones that smell really good. And, my clients know this intuitively because a lot of my clients, when we are toxic from various things, develop MCAS. They're very, very sensitive. And they cannot go anywhere that has perfumed or a burning candle or anything scented. They get immediate headaches or unwellness because they're on such toxic overload. So candles are kind of like a no-no for patients who struggle with detoxifying. It's funny because we connect it with spa and relaxation and smell good, and meanwhile, it's such a trigger. Candle is such a trigger. That's so interesting. So, one last question I want to ask you, because I can go on forever with you because this is a fascinating topic, is, so many of our listeners are going to go to supermarket and like, all right, I'm going to change my shopping list and I'm going to do this thing and choose my things that are in my house all the time. How do we tell them to spot greenwash marketing? For those who don't know what greenwash marketing means, it's like when the label just looks like it's organic and it's the best and this has to be the product, and in fact it's just a marketing mumbo jumbo. That's what greenwashing is. I mean, I'm sure you have a better definition of it. But if you can give us your perspective of what greenwashing is, and then tell us how to spot it, so that a lot of times I'll talk to clients, I'm like, look what I got. Like, this is with food. They'll be like, look, it's gluten-free. And I'm like, yeah, this whole thing is made out of sugar and corn. So who cares if it's gluten-free, right? So tell us how that works in the toxic world.
It's the safe assumption that most things are greenwashed.
So I wasn't ready for that. The delivery also was so deadpan. I was waiting. Everything's greenwashed. Okay.
I didn't even know what I was going to say. For example, there's a major brand, I'm not going to name it, with...
What does it rhyme with?
I'm not going to name it, but it offers a wide range of green, sustainable, non-toxic products. Some products actually... Okay, you could go to the Environmental Working Group. They have databases, so you can enter your products there and learn the toxicity of the products. And if you just take one brand and you enter a number of different dishwashing detergents or laundry detergents or hand soaps, you'll find a range of toxicity ratings. This one brand can produce like laundry detergent that has a rating ranging from A to F. And that's a good example of how complicated it is for consumers.
And trust the company itself, because each product has to be looked and vetted by itself.
You shouldn't trust any one company or any one retailer, even a retailer that says we ban like these 1,300 chemicals that the European Union ban in our cosmetics. You shouldn't assume that every product sold is actually non-toxic. And so the bad news is, to really know if your products are non-toxic, you should research every product. But there are also practical strategies to just, the 80-20 rule where, so I have this 40-day home detox where I help people look out and get to know 6 household repeat offenders. Household repeat offenders are like common denominators I found among probably the thousands of products I've researched, because I realized I can't shop by researching every purchase before. There has to be an easier way. And so, for example, just getting to know all the different ways plastics shows up in your life is a really high impact way to detox your home and body. So plastics is a household repeat offender. Fragrance is a household repeat offender. But as an example, I'm trying to think of examples of surprises. Plastic, I had no idea that there are certain fabrics that were plastic. It didn't occur to me polyester is plastic.
Plastic.
And also
like yoga pants and stretch pants that we go to is plastic.
Yeah, anything that has stretch probably has plastic.
You go to like Zen Out and do your downward dog and you're like wrapped in plastic. It's crazy. I just discovered that this year.
Yeah. That's really demoralizing.
Sorry.
No, I knew that. But another thing that surprised me was dental floss and the materials that make up feminine care products, like
Oh my God.
because tampons, diapers, they are often made of materials that are plastic. And so it's real. Those are just like examples off the top of my mind that shocked me, but there's so many ways that plastics show up. So it's just so worthwhile to get to know plastics and edit it out. Do the love test. Ask yourself, do I love or need it? And as I've looked for safer alternatives, it's brought really so much meaning, like meaningful fulfillment and reconnection with nature, because often the safer alternatives are much more natural.
So interesting.
Sources. And so it has been very fulfilling. And with fragrance, some very surprising products that were fragranced include baby dolls. I was shocked that there were baby dolls that smell like babies, and garbage bags. It took me so long to find garbage bags that weren't scented.
That's so true. Oh my God, that's so crazy. I didn't even consider that. They always smell so good.
Why do they smell so good?
Oh my God, that's insane.
Can disrupt your hormones and participate in your endocrine system, which guides all biological processes. So that's why, just pick one thing to detox. It can make such a big difference. If you just detox your garbage bags, that improves your indoor air quality.
Oh my God, love that.
You don't have an emotional attachment to your, which garbage you use.
Yeah, there's one person that's like, absolutely, you take this garbage bag out of my cold, dead hands. There's always the one person that's like, yes. But no, you're right. You should not have an emotional connection to your garbage bags. That is so funny. Okay, this is amazing. I honestly could talk to you for another hour, but I should probably let you go back to your life. Tell everyone how they could reach you, where they could find your book. What is it that, people just tell us?
Well, I would love for you to join my newsletter, because through my newsletter, you'll learn about the many other things I do. I have a podcast, I have detox workshops, I have a detox academy, which really helps people focus on safer products. But when you reach a point where you want to just change the way you see things and do a deep detox of your home, then the 40-day home detox informs your common sense.
Very nice.
We learn more about these household repeat offenders so that making safer choices becomes more intuitive. So anyways, you can follow everything through the newsletter at ruanliving.com, RUAN living. And also just reach out in any platform that you are active on, whether it's Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. We try and be active on them, but we definitely check those messages. And hello@ruanliving.com. I'd love to. I'm excited to connect with people who care.
Yes, I love this. And we're going to put all of this in our description so our game changers and our listeners can find you as well. This is amazing. Is there any last minute statement or something that you want to tell our listeners, or do you feel whole and complete?
I guess I'll just end with reminding people that small changes can really transform your life. Through small changes, you can notice big improvement in energy and skin, or, the effects vary by individual, but it's never too late. The sooner the better. And nature is naturally brilliant and resilient and wanting to heal, and we are nature.
I love that. Resonate with every single word. I love that so much. It's been a real eye-opener, a real pleasure talking to you. Very informative. Thank you so much for your time.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
Of course.